Yes, I've been at NIH a very long time, just past my 31st year. My job today is to tell you a little bit about how NIH works, and then a little bit about how NIAID works in the small business realm. And I'm going to start, I think this is how I do it, with some basics. So when I was a program officer a number of years ago, during one of the first shutdowns of the government, I kept getting a call from one of my investigators. I was running a clinical trial or a clinical study. It wasn't actually a trial. And she kept calling and calling. And I finally called her back and I said, I really can't talk to you. The government shut down. I'm not allowed to work. She goes, NIH is part of the government? Okay. Recently, like this week, I was talking to a small business owner, and I was telling them a little bit about what the NIH does to support small businesses. And she asked, so where do you get your money? And I said, well, Congress gives us our money, but it comes from you. All our money is from the taxpayers. So I just want to, and I don't know if there's a pointer, just tell you that I'm part of the executive branch of the government. That the executive branch is made up of a number of agencies. I work for the Department of Health and Human Services. So you'll also hear from the Department of Defense and some of the other agencies that do small business. So the National Institutes of Health is plural. There are 27 institutes and centers at NIH. I remember, a number of years ago, I was talking to a delegation from Russia, and they didn't have the concept of it institutes, right? Because most countries, you have the Institute of Health that covers all the different health entities. At NIH, we are independent institutes of health under the umbrella of the NIH. So I work at the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases. It's my 7th institute at NIH in the 31 years I've been there. NCI is the largest institute. It has a separate appropriation from Congress. NIAID is the second. NIAID is made up of 3 different buckets of appropriation. We have the AIDS appropriation, we have our basic infectious disease appropriation, and we have our biodefense appropriation. And so all of those buckets, we do small business programs in all 3 of those buckets. You'll be hearing today from cancer, from NIAID, and from NIDA, the Drug Abuse Institute, from NIH. We all do very similar things, and we all do slightly different things. So the small business program for the government is run out of the Small Business Administration, part of the executive branch again. It has the America's Seed Fund. The whole purpose behind the small business program is to invest in the economy of the nation, is to take sort of the engine of the nation and have it develop products and things, services that support the national good. There are 2 types of small business programs, general buckets. So one is the government funds small businesses to support services and goods, right? That we have a certain mandates through contracts to use small business organizations, entities. Also, when we fund our contracts, they have mandates to use small businesses wherever possible to do their work for the government. The other bucket is research and development, and that's what I'm going to be talking about. So the research and development side are the 2 small business programs that are supported by the government. It's to both for scientific excellence and technology innovation. It is designed to support the mission of whatever agency is funding the small business, but it also is to support the economy. Right? We all know that the small businesses are the indicators of the economy. Our job as federal agencies are to keep the businesses going directed at our mission, and NIH's mission is biomedical research and improving the health of the nation. So the two programs, the Small Business Innovative Research Program, the government has mandated that each agency set aside 3.2% of our budget to fund small businesses. All that money must go to SBIRs, and then 0.45% to STTRs, the technology transfer programs through the universities. So this is a non-negotiable. The government must spend this amount of money of our appropriation from Congress on small businesses for research and development. So there's a slight difference between the two, SBIR and STTRs. You can, in SBIR, you are the small business entity. You can partner as you wish. You can only outsource your work to a certain percentage based on what kind of SBIR grants you have. And for the PI of the SBIR and the small business, the person who applies, more than 50% of their effort needs to be with that small business, okay? The STTR, the Technology Transfer Program, you are collaborating with the university. The grant still goes to the small business, but you are associated with a nonprofit research institute, a university, a medical school, some entity. You have a minimum work requirement that's a little bit less because you're associating with the institution, and you can be employed by either entity, okay? So this is the eligibility criteria, not-for-profit, US-based business. So again, the point is we're trying to stimulate the US economy here, so you must be US-based. Small means 500 or less. It's a pretty good size. I don't know how many of your small businesses out there are that large, but it does allow some growth, so that's good. The work must be done in the US with some exceptions, but it's really to empower and impact the United States. And then there are ownership rules. A couple years ago in our authorization for the small business program, it did allow some venture capital ownership of the small business to be able to participate in the small business program. Prior to that, it was not allowed. So that's a good change. It does allow you to have a diversity of your investment in the small business. So 11 agencies of the federal government participate in the small business program. You can see DOD is the largest. They do all of their small business through acquisition contracts. They buy what they're looking for. DHHS is the second largest. That's the Department of Health and Human Services, not to be confused with DHS, which is Homeland Security. So if it has two H's, that's us. So you can see that in, I think this is, 18. We didn't have the 19 numbers for all the agencies. But in 18, NIH, CDC, and FDA, the three agencies inside the department that do the small business program, gave out over $1 billion in the small business program. Some of them do both SBIR and STTR. Some do only SBIR. So these are all the places that you can get money if you're aligned with any of these activities that go on. And there's a lot of overlap and cross between. You're going to hear from DITRA today. So we at NIAID also do a lot of biodefense and RADNUC support research. So there is overlap in the different agencies, and then among the NIH, there's a lot of overlap in that as well. So it's good to sort of know that you have multiple avenues to raise funds to apply for grants and contracts. So NIAID, again, second largest institute, by definition has the second largest budget because it's all based on a percentage of our appropriation from Congress. So in 2019, which ended in September, 164 million we spent in small business programs. All the institutes participate. We all have overlapping missions. So you can think about if you were doing something related to asthma, that would be both related to the Heart, Lung, and Blood Institute and related to Allergy and Infectious Diseases Institute. You have a number of cross-references to get money. So NIH's total investment over the last handful of years is spread out across the country. However, you'll notice that the biggest portions of dollars go to the coasts, right? California, Massachusetts are the darkest, and then a variety of coasts of other states get money. All states get money. That's one of our mandates. Another one of the mandates from the Small Business Association is to try to bring out the economy, the business through small businesses in other states. So we do try to spend time in the other states trying to help people apply for the small business program and get those advantages. Women-owned businesses, minority-owned businesses, also we try to specifically help. But again, it depends on the application process, as Ram was telling us earlier. So the NIH has a very awesome SBIR website. I would very much encourage you, it's on the bottom here, sbir.nih.gov, to go through that. It has, sort of a little hard to see here, a variety of different buttons to get you to the specific kind of information that you would like to know, whether it's about applying, whether it's about resources, whether it's just who do you talk to at the various institutes, or NIH Central. So Matt Portnoy, as Ram said earlier, used to be the head of the small business program for all of NIH. He has now stepped away and has a job very similar to mine at one of the other institutes. And so Dr. Matt McMahon has taken over a new enterprise that NIH is creating called the SEED office at NIH. And so a lot of new programs will probably start to happening. Some are fading in, some are fading out. I'm going to try to do the best I can with all of that. So there are 3 phases to the small business program. The phase 1, the feasibility, phase 2, development, and phase 3, commercialization. The small business set aside does not cover commercialization. That's where you need to go and raise independent revenue to move your stuff to commercialization. NIH, all agencies can use their own non-SBIR appropriation to pay for commercialization. NIH very rarely does that. We are a funding research organization. We don't commercialize ourselves. We rely on all of you to do that and our grantees. So there are a couple different ways you can apply for a small business grant. You can apply for the phase 1, get that, do well, apply for the phase 2, do well, and move on. You can do fast track. You can apply for phase 1 and phase 2 together so that you set your milestones, and if you meet your milestones in the phase 1, you automatically move to phase 2. You do not need to apply again. So that's sort of nice. You can go direct to phase 2. So if you've gotten money from somewhere else that accomplishes your feasibility, you can apply directly to the phase 2. You don't need to apply for the phase 1 to get the phase 2. Right? You can go direct to phase 2. We also, it's not on here. We have a lot of other support mechanisms that support these various things. Here it is. So we also do something called a Phase 2B Competing Renewal Award. So if you're not familiar with the government lingo, Competing means you apply. Renewal means that you've already have a grant and you're applying to renew that grant, okay? So if you have a phase 2, you need a little bit more time, we will fund your phase 2B, a competing renewal award. So you have to apply, you get a little bit more money to continue your phase 2 work, right? So all institutes at NIH participate in this, or a number, I don't know if that's 27 up there. But you just need to contact your program staff to figure out how to take that path forward. I want to make a point here. Your program staff, the program person who's managing your grant, or the program person that's on your summary statement, if you don't get funded, they need to be your best friend. They need to be on your speed dial, okay? These are the people that can help you. They are all scientists. Most of them who manage small business came out of industry have some relevance or background, or have been managing small grants for a very long time and can be a wealth of a resource. So that is your take home for the day. Know your program officer, know who it is, call them frequently, give them updates on your grandchildren, right? So, so this is another great way to keep you going, non-dilutive, keep you moving towards your goal. As was mentioned, to get government funds, you must apply. All right, the government can't just hand you money. You must apply for it. So there is a whole application process at NIH to do this. So everything is electronic. Everything back from the days where you used to have to FedEx all your copies to an SRO that would do your review. Now everything is electronic. There are 5 registrations that you must have in order to receive a grant. And the DUNS number being the first one is migrating to a SAMI over the course of the next handful of years. So you will know that as you get your DUNS number. We're hoping that it'll be a very streamlined process. We don't have a lot of information on that yet. But to get your award, if you want to get your award quickly, you need to have all these registrations done. On the NIH SBIR website, it'll help you. It'll walk you through. It'll help you figure out how to do this. The contracts go through a different route. They are also all electronic at NIH. So at NIH, we have a system called the Electronic Contract Proposal Submission System, right? ECPS. All of our contracts go into that system, and it happened to be developed at NIAID, so we actually get all of our contracts that way, but NIH gets all their SBIR contracts that way, and we divvy them back out to the institutes for the review and the funding. So this is a process, if you're familiar with NIH, with NIAID, this is our system that is now used enterprise-wide. There are 3 dates that you need to apply to NIH for grants. This is just grants only, right? So there's 3 due dates. As I said, everything at NIH comes in electronic and everything gets peer-reviewed. If you are applying to just investigator-initiated, regular old SBIR, you will be reviewed by the Center of Scientific Review. That is our center that reviews the vast majority of everything that comes into NIH. If there's a specific FOA that the Cancer Institute puts out, Cancer will review it, right? But if it's your idea and you're coming in with your own thoughts, you will go to the Center for Scientific Review. At NIH, we must have 2 levels of review. We have the peer review, and then we have the council review, which is a federal advisory committee. And that advisory committee advises the Institute on our funding practices and policies and provides help to us in our funding decisions. So it must go to council before we can award it. And then the earliest award date following a council is usually a couple months. SBIRs take a little bit longer. You need to have all your registrations. You have a lot of just-in-time information. The faster you want to get funded, the faster you need to be on the phone, your program officer and your grants management officer. That's another person. They're also listed in, they may not be on your summary statement, but they will be contacting you if you are within the funding pay lines. The faster you can get them information, if you have a person that can be the point person and get them everything they need, the faster they can get you out the door. This takes a significant amount of time. There are pages and pages of checklists the government has to do to make sure you meet all your requirements. It is not a simple task to get you funded. We do the best we can, but if we're running up against something and you can't provide it, we're just going to skip you and fund somebody else, because our goal is to fund as many as we can and get out the door. If you can't help yourself, we can't help you either, right? Just so you know. Here's the timeline of the process. You come up with an idea. You send it in. It gets assigned to CSR. CSR assigns it to a study section, and they assign it to the institute. You can ask for both if you want as you're submitting. There's a place where you can say, I think it would be best in this study section, and I think it would be best in this institute. If you go to the CSR website, it tells you all the different study sections. So you can see what the rosters are. You can see who's on these things. Once the application gets into the study section, the scientific review officer, who is also a scientist, will send it to the reviewers. The reviewers get 6 weeks or so to read the pile of applications, well, they're all electronic now, to read the applications so that they can do a good job on your review. They do the review. The summary statements are written. You can imagine it takes a little bit of time if we're getting tens of thousands of applications. Get the summary statement written, get it to the advisory council, get it to grants management, they get more information from you, and it gets out the door. We do this as fast as we possibly can. Sometimes, depending on the time of the year, it takes a little bit longer. Anything at the crunch time at the end of the fiscal year is going to take a little bit longer. Just think about how you want to do this. In the government, you must apply to a funding announcement. So funding opportunity announcements, FOAs, right? It used to be in the old days when I started at NIH, if you wanted to put in a grant, you just put it in. Now you actually have to put a funding announcement number onto your application. That's been a while now, so I'm sure that you're all very familiar with this. But you can find all of the different information and all the funding announcements for all of NIH on the SBIR website. So what we use, what we call an Omnibus solicitation for all SBIRs. So we have one for SBIRs and one for STTRs, and they have different funding numbers. And NIH, about 3 years ago, split all of our funding announcements into clinical trials not allowed and clinical trials required, so that we could better track for Congress what the number of patients we have enrolled in trials and all the trials we're doing as a reporting feature. NIAID does not participate in the Omnibus clinical trial required. We have our own. So, but we do participate in all of the non-clinical trial allowed. And these have the standing due dates that I talked about. So in addition, the NIH has a Omnibus R&D Contract Solicitation for small businesses. It's for phase 1, direct to phase 2, and for fast track. It comes out once a year, usually at the end of the summer. They're usually due the beginning of October. These are the ones that go in through ECPS. All of these, whether you're going in for a grant or you're going in for a contract, put it in early. And I don't mean the day before early. I mean the week before early, the 10 days before early. Something is going to go wrong when you put it in. And you want to pull it up and look at it, and you're going to say, page 12 is missing, right? So you need to withdraw it and put it back in again. You need time for all of this. So I would highly encourage you for anything you put in, make sure you put it in early. So NIH has a pretty good success rate for SBIRs and STTRs, and they're similar. We do not do phase 2B for STTRs, only for SBIRs. There's nothing to say as you're moving along that you become an SBIR if you've finished your relationship with the university, right? There's nothing to say also when you're applying for the contract solicitation, you get a phase 1 SBIR, and you're not in, you have to, for contracts, you have to be invited to submit your phase 2. If the institute decides that this isn't what they really wanted and they don't invite you for phase 2 contract SBIR, do the grant phase 2, direct to phase 2, right? Because you've gotten the phase 1 money through the contract, go to the grant, right? You can do that at any time you want. You don't have to wait, right, to hear. So this is NIAID's success rate over the last 10 years. As you can see, the phase 2B, 60% of the people that needed more money get more money after their phase 2. This is a pretty good program. All right, now I want to talk a little bit about NIAID specifically. Allergy and infectious diseases. We cover a lot of different specific areas. We are specific yet broad, right? So as you can imagine, allergy and infectious diseases. So immunology, we do a lot of immunology, whether it's food allergies. We just finished a large peanut study. We do infectious disease, flu. Flu is always a big one. We are very engaged in emerging diseases. We were in the forefront with the CDC and the WHO for Ebola, and the DOD and the State Department and everybody else for Ebola, Zika, all of those things. Biodefense, we have a whole appropriation for biodefense, right? We fund a lot. We fund a handful of BSL-4 labs where you can study some of these very strict agents, select agents for research and for biodefense. We do global health. So NIAID Global Health is a huge part of ours because many of the emerging diseases don't start in the States, but they start somewhere else and they come here. It's a global world, it's a global economy. Everything crosses borders. We need to be prepared here. We are prepared here because we are prepared overseas. Some of our highest volume applications, not only in SBIR, but in everywhere. So bacteriology, MRSA, flu, Ebola, food allergies, and HIV. So all of these entities and things, now we share these with other institutes, but almost all of any emerging disease or any of these things will come here. Immunology, we're coming to learn, right? As we're developing new drugs and looking at new pathways, immunology underlies a lot of different diseases. So NIAID touches almost every disease entity at NIH with the underlying immunology. So if you're studying something that impacts inflammation or pathways, we can be one of your institutes, even if it's not a disease specific to what we study. So these are some of our program priorities. You might have heard them in the State of the Union last year. Many of the entities in the entire government are working on these. Universal flu. This year, we're struggling, right? The flu vaccine that we developed this year is a great vaccine, but influenza B, a number of children have succumbed to the flu because we didn't quite get it right, we being the government. So how do we deal with this? Well, we're very strongly working on a universal flu vaccine. This is very important. Antibiotic resistance. So combating antibiotic-resistant bacteria is another one where we have put a lot of interest into. And then HIV control, ending the HIV epidemic, was in the State of the Union. And so our mission is research around that. So how do we do research around controlling the epidemic? And HIV has moved from an acute disease to a chronic disease. The comorbidities around that, all of that contribute. We know that the rise in opioid use contributes to the rise in HIV. So how do we partner with everyone to attack these? Small businesses are a key to this across the country. So at NIAID, most of our money, so last year, 164 million, went to investigator-initiated activities, 80%. 80% of our funds, you guys' ideas, you put in your stuff to the Omnibus, it gets peer reviewed, we fund it. Our funding pay line last year, I don't really remember, we're usually in around 30, something like that. That's where most of our money goes. 20% goes to the contracts. We're getting more engaged in our contract solicitation. So we want to, if we have specific targets or specific things we want to work on, we usually do it through our contract omnibus. So that's where you would look. And we would put in there 20%, roughly, but we are also finding that we're getting a lot more very specific things, and we might think about investing a little bit more on those things that we're interested in. As I mentioned, we don't participate in the Omnibus clinical trial. We have our own, a U44. That it's a cooperative agreement. For those of you who know a little bit about cooperative agreements, this is where the program staff get more involved. We do not get involved to run your programs. They still belong to you. This is a grant mechanism. They are yours. But these people are very well in tune with how to help you. Do you need regulatory support? How do we help you be successful through your recruitment and your targeting phases and things like that? So the program staff, you need to talk to them before you apply. Another one good to know. So we participate in a number of FOAs, as I've mentioned. The Omnibus solicitation for the clinical trials not allowed, both SBIR and STTR. The phase 2, right, the phase 2. We do a RAD-NUC countermeasures program, if you're interested in that. We participate in the Commercialization Readiness pilot, as well as the tick-borne diseases and small business. Okay, so you can find out a lot more on the website, and especially about the Commercialization Readiness pilot program. This was reauthorized by Congress and the SBA. NIH participates in one of them. It supports technical assistance when you need it for late stage development. So you must have a phase 2 in order to get this program. You can subcontract for this. So normally you can only give out so much of your money to get something done. This you can give out a lot more if you need to get, non-human primate work done, or you need to do something in order to get yourself ready for commercialization. There's a whole list of things that you can do. You have the slides. It's a little hard to read. You can get all of this on the website. We have a lot of other resources that you can get at NIAID. Our clinical trial networks, if you have something you want tested, get a hold of the program officer. We can do that. We have in the RAD-NUC program, you can get help with the FDA animal rule, move things along. We have clinical staff in each of our divisions. So in our infectious disease division, in our immunology transplantation division, in our AIDS division, that can specifically help you move your product through the clinical aspect, or what you might need to get to that point. We also have resources. So we have we fund all of these through different mechanisms, and you just access them, right? So animal models, diagnostic screening, genomic things, all our clinical trial network, business development resources. We have all of these things already funded, and you can just tap into any of these. And again, you can get this on the NIAID site through resources. One of the most used resources that NIAID has developed, it's used by everyone at NIH, are our sample applications. This is where we have taken we've asked investigators who have had successful applications, can we take your application, redact various things, but show you what success looks like? We have every kind that you can imagine. What does success look like? How do you use this? This is on our website. You can get through it from the SBIR NIH site. It also links to these. This is one of the most used resources in NIH. We also do it for R01s. We do it for non-SBIR grants as well. Our Ks, Fs, Ts, all of those training things. So if you do other things, we have sample applications, but we also have this. I would like to just make a plug here. At NIAID, in my group, we have a funding newsletter that goes out to more than 100,000 people around the world. It talks about all the policies, all the new things coming up. Some of it's NIH-wide, some of it's very specific to NIAID. I would recommend going to the NIAID site, typing in funding news, and sign up for the listserv. It will really help you know what's coming, what's changing, what laws, policies, regulations, everything that's going on. Some nice success stories are also there. You can also ask questions, and we do, anonymous Q&A and give everybody the answers. So another really good resource. TABA. So this is great. Everybody should do this. In your application, you can request technical and business assistance. In the phase one, $6,500 and $50,000 in a phase two. This is something you all should be doing. This is new. This is something that can help you in your market research and your validation, all of the things. You can reach out and get somebody to come in and help you with this stuff, or you can contract it out. You can do whatever you want, but this is a free way to get some money and get yourself a jump start. It's just in the application, yes, right. So there are other things, I'm sort of running out of time, but there are other parts of the NIH website where you don't need an application, you don't need funding to use resources. But that one, you just put it in your grant application that this amount of money is going to TABA, technical assistance.
Is there a success rate with these three?
It's too new. No, we haven't tracked that yet. Most people aren't aware. So if you don't put it in your application, we can't give it to you. You have to ask. We can't give you money. You have to ask. So it has to be in the application. So yes.
Is this part of the fee or is it different?
No, this is different. It's not part of the fee. This is technical and business assistance that you can ask for in your application. Okay. The caps for the application still apply. At NIAID, you can't go over the cap with this money. You just build it into the $300,000 or the $1 million. Okay. NIH has entrepreneurs in residence. Most of the institutes have them. They also have them in the NIH Central, but you can get in touch with these. These are experts who have had a small business and are helping us to help you. They can help with a variety of different things. The NIH Technical Assistance Program, we've got a number of them. The Commercialization Acceleration Program right now, CAP, is closed. It says on the website, check back in the summer. So I'm hoping that the seed office will bring that back. But I-Corps, this is an amazing program. This is training to help you understand your business and where you're going and what the possible marketing avenues are for you. It's very intensive. It requires a huge commitment on your part, but everyone has walked out learning quite a bit on this. The niche program, it helps you with your market strategy. It helps you with a few other things. All of these are on the NIH site. So I just want to talk a little bit about how some of these have been used. So these are all sort of genericized here, but that somebody came in with a C. diff therapeutic after going through ICOR. They had one avenue they were going for, treat acute infections in hospitals, and they found out that outpatient recurrent infections was a much better market for their product. The same with company 2, point of contact blood infection biomarker detection. They were going after sepsis, and they decided it was much more practical to go after septicemia detection. So you get very involved, and you interview a lot of stakeholders and figure out where your niche is. And the same with the CAP program, being able to pivot and get yourself favorable term sheets to get your next level of funding. The commercialization resources that NIAID participates in for our awardees are these various things up through here. Our entrepreneur in residence is Adam Sorkin. He is the one that can help you get access to all of these other things. We have at BIO every year, NIH has an innovation zone where we select small businesses and we partner them with various companies to try, or with various investors to help them, and they can showcase what they're doing. So this is a great way to get yourself out there. Having NIH support and NIH funding, as was mentioned before, really gives you the leg up. That's non-dilutive funding. It gets you to a place, and it's been validated, right? It's your peers have said that you were worth funding, and the NIH has invested more in you to make you a more attractive company. There's a program called On Par. I'm not as familiar with this one, but this is essentially those that just miss the pay lines at the various institutes. That this On Par program is able to pick you up and get you moving forward, and hopefully for a second chance of funding. So that you submit the abstracts through this process. I would say, because I'm not the expert on this, please go to the website and see how this could help you. I have a few examples here, which also in your slides, of groups that have been very successful through the NIH funding. Malaria, and you have these slides, I've been told, so I'm not gonna go into depth on these. I want to leave a little bit of time for questions here. So they used the CRP program, and they have become very successful. ZMAP, Ebola, I think a lot of you heard about that. That was an NIAID small business program that got picked up. And then this company was one that we highlighted at BIO, at the Innovation Zone. And they have gone on to develop new applications. Every year we tried it at NIAID to go out, and most of the other institutes do as well, to regions and pull in people to talk specifically about what's available. We bring in the program staff so you can talk one-on-one with the program staff. We bring in successful things. We figure out in that region what the most consistent need is. We have one coming up with North Carolina State as a partner. We're always looking for new ideas. I would love to invite anyone who would like us to come. Feel free to contact Adam. HHS also has an annual meeting. This year it's in Las Vegas. The government has an annual small business meeting, and that's usually in May, June. The date hasn't been announced for that yet as far as I know. But all of these, the nice thing about the HHS is you get all of us together, FDA, CDC, and NIH together. At the government one, you get DOD and NIH together, right? So you can bounce back and forth between all these different entities. So my advice is look through the websites. They have a lot of information. The last one here listed on the websites, Reporter. Everybody should be familiar with Reporter. You can put into Reporter what NIH is funded in this area. You can find out all the different things that NIH has funded so that you can either find a partner or a stakeholder, perhaps, or you can see, boy, this is saturated, I need to pivot, right? You can find out who we fund, how we fund. You can get the abstracts of the grants that are funded. There's a huge amount of information on the Reporter website that you can use. Know the research priorities of the Institute. The institutes always have the caveat, right? We put our program relevance at the top of the list of the things that we pick to fund. So we fund by pay line at NIAID, but sometimes there's something that's not in the pay line that is exactly what we need, and we will go after that and fund it. So it's not just pay line things we fund. Sometimes we will go beyond the pay line to say that meets something that we have been looking for a long time. Talking to your program officer again doesn't hurt. The program officer, so it's on, you can get the SBIR program contact through the SBIR NIH website. If you put in an application without speaking to your program first, the program person will be listed on your summary statement. Get your 5 registrations done. Answer all the just-in-time questions immediately. Have a correspondence. Don't be throwing things over the fence and hoping somebody's picking it up, right? Submit early, days, not hours, not minutes, days, weeks. I said that before. So in NIAID Small Business Program, our coordinator is Natalia. We have a small group in my division, in my group, that coordinates across the Institute. Each of our grants management folks, again, those are the people that will be handling the SBIR contracts. They become very familiar with what they need and who to help. We have our 3 division representatives. So for technical assistance in the science areas, these are going to be the great people. In the small business arena, my staff will be the great people. But they all work together. We meet all the time. We talk about everything that comes through the door. You can find us on the web, very many places. So I hope you have learned a little bit from me today. I've enjoyed being here with you. I know I'm meeting with several of you over the course of the day, but if there's any questions, yes.
And maybe you touched on this, but are the awardees, are they giving any IP rights to the government?
No. Everything, a grant is an assistance mechanism. It all belongs to you. So the government takes no equity. Even our contracts, it's all under BIDOL, so which is the regulation that the applicant keeps it. There is a provision, just to be completely open, that if the government funds something and the entities that we fund don't take it forward, we can come in and move it forward ourselves. It's never happened, but it probably, definitely. That's not our job. Our job is to help you guys. It's not to do it ourselves. Yes.
Do you have to publish a paper in relation to the research that's funded?
Do you have to publish a paper in relation to the research that's funded? We highly encourage sharing of information and publishing papers. The peer review system to get from a phase 1 to a phase 2, or to get anywhere beyond that, they generally look at that. And there's no requirement, but it is sharing of information and data resources is a key to the NIH funding. Yes.
Is there what is the SBIR plan for
So is there a year?
part in the application that we need to fill out the complete for the idea security if there is no publication on that idea yet?
Oh, that's not as far as I'm aware. Yeah.
Isn't the abstract published?
Yes, right. So the abstract, if you get funded, the abstract is what goes into Reporter, right? So be careful in your abstract, you're not putting in any information that is proprietary, right? If you accidentally do, call your program officer and we can get you to have access to change that once it gets funded, right? We wouldn't do that if you're not getting funded. But we are the government. So when somebody comes in and requests through the Freedom of Information Act information, we always, if it has to do with a grant, we always go back to the grantee and say, are you comfortable with this redaction, right? So we don't make those decisions independently of you. So that's another place. And just like when we put up the applications as, these are awesome applications to look at for funding, we've got complete approval from the grantee. If something proprietary gets out, it hurts you, it hurts us. That's not what we're about. Yes.
Are phase 2Bs evaluated and funded the same way as phase 1s and phase 2? Do they go to the same study sections, and as long as you make it under the pay line, they're funded, or do they need some kind of pre-approval from the PO and some shepherding?
So they definitely need pre-approval from the program officer. In our case, Adam Sorkin manages all of them for NIAID, and I don't know the answer to that. I will ask my staff as soon as I get to my little table in there. Yes, please, and I'm publicly available. Yes.
Are you interested in funding research in the area related to prevention of spread and multi-drug resistance?
Absolutely. Right. So the answer is, do we fund prevention? I'm just going to say in general. So prevention, treatment, diagnostics. We are very interested in all of those. They all make up our portfolio. We also had a program for our small business a handful of years ago where we had, so NIH is divided to intramural and extramural, what we call it, right? So our intramural program are the scientists that do research on campus, or actually we also have a lab in Rocky Mountain, Montana. And as the intramural staff develop something, we look for partners to commercialize or to take it to the next step. We put out a special program in treatment and diagnostics for taking some of the intramural discoveries specifically for a small business to take and move on. We got a little bit of interest, but I think we also are trying to strive to partner more between our intramural and our extramural. So, yes.
The last steps on the slide showed were funding is awarded and then research is done. But is there any, you had said that the money is supposed to be spent in the U.S.
Yes.
Oversight of that? Do any people look at this later?
Yes. So all grants must submit a sort of closeout. And so we will, the program staff that managed the grant will look to see how they're done. I think one of the things that I want you to take away from this is the program staff want you to be successful, because then they're successful. Oh, did you know my small business did this? You know, so we're very tied to making sure you're successful so that we can talk about how successful you are. And if you're having issues, we're gonna find some way to help you, because that makes us that much more successful. So we do keep up on where you're going, what you're doing. One thing we would love, and we've talked a lot about at NIH, is how do we follow small businesses as they move on from the NIH funding. A lot of them get sold, bought out, you know, they switch CEOs. You know, it's really hard to track where our investment goes. But for Congress to keep giving us this money and for us to be successful, we need to know that you're successful so that we can fund the next generation of small businesses. Yeah. Oh, okay. One last question. Thank you.
Yes, so if you get funded by NIAID or one of the organizations, can you get funding, venture funding from outside the country?
From outside the country. I'm not seeing why you can't. It might, depending on the amount of funding, it might not allow you to go to the next step. But that's the whole point, right, is to move you to a space where you don't need the government support anymore, that you can commercialize. But off the top of my head, I don't know. That's another good question. I need to write these down, somebody.
To add one comment on the question, I think it's also related how much the other countries' funding you get, because they share the equity.
Right. So there are rules on how much equity can be owned in your small business for applying for the different types of programs. You know, somebody from outside the country owning, I'm not sure where that would fit in. I think it's probably more of the cost or the dollar investment. Thank you so much. Appreciate your time.